Welcome to another edition of Face to Face, and tonight my special guest is Tony Ayres, writer, director and all that. Welcome to the program, Tony.
Thanks.
And you've sort of done a couple of things lately that have done quite well. I mean, at the moment you've got The Fat Boy at Playbox in South Melbourne, and before that you were involved with a film called Walking on Water. But before we go into all that sort of stuff, we'll talk about that sort of work that you've been doing. Just give people a bit of your background. Where were you born and raised?
Okay, I'm Chinese Australian. I was born in Macau, which is just near Hong Kong, Portuguese territory, and came to Australia in 1964 when I was 3 years old with my mother and my sister. My mother married an Australian sailor, so we ended up following him back here. And I, so basically since I was 3 I've lived in Australia. I grew up in Melbourne and lived in Perth for a while, and Canberra, Sydney, back to Melbourne now.
And do you find it so difficult coming out to your family? I suppose it might have been a difference between here and Macau, but what was it like?
Well, my family situation has always been... it's actually a great source of my work. I've written a bit about my family because my mother was a nightclub singer and very glamorous, and but she died when I was 11 years old, and my Australian stepfather looked after me from the ages of 11 till 14, but then he died when I was 14, so I was an orphan. And in fact, the first person I ever came out to was my history teacher. When I was probably about 15.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, but you know, in some senses, being an orphan is tragic, but in other ways, it's actually saves you from having to come out.
True. Yeah, because it's not that sort of supportive environment, is it, to talk about?
Yeah. There are different kinds of pressures. Yeah.
And was it hard with school friends or other people? How did your sort of parents react, or your new parents?
Well, my history teacher, it's kind of a complicated story, but I ended up living with my history teacher when I was 15 years old. He and I had been close, and all through my school years, and when my stepfather died, I initially moved in with my stepfather's fiancée. He was going to remarry this.
Okay. Yeah.
And I initially moved in with her, and then sort of a few months after moving in with her, I discovered that she was quite an unstable person, and we fought a lot, and so I sort of left that place, and we had a huge fight one night, and I just walked out with a suitcase and rang my history teacher up, and he said, come and live with me. And so I moved in with him and his wife and 2 children, and so this is all when I was 14 going to 15.
Young.
No, they were sort of very tumultuous years. And he was quite a liberal person. He was smart. He was everyone at school adored him, so it was kind of relatively easy to come out to him. It was it was a relatively easy thing. And
so you reacted okay when you did tell him, sort of.
He actually decided to go to he was very male. He was kind of progressive, but in other ways he was quite a traditional male, and so his way of dealing with me coming out was say, let's go and celebrate, let's go to the casino. So he took me to, which is a very strange thing to do, but he took me to an illegal casino.
Oh.
So we went through this back door thing and we sort of gambled, and that was kind of, and drank.
Yeah.
And that was his kind of way of saying, oh, you know, even though you're a puff, you're okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, it does sound weird, but that's not important really, where it happens.
Yeah, exactly.
The way he treated you.
He was trying to say in his own terms. He was trying to say you can still be male and do all of these kinds of, you know,
okay.
sort of things.
And was he like a role model to you, even though, like, he wasn't gay himself?
No, he wasn't gay.
Did you have any role models or anyone that inspired you in terms of feeling good about yourself and comfortable with being gay?
I didn't actually ever really feel uncomfortable about being gay, to be honest. I sort of...
So very quickly you thought, this is who I am, that's it.
I kind of...
What happened?
I remember the first time I had sex with a man, which was when I was 14, and I got picked up by a coal miner whilst when I was at a bus stop. This is in Perth, of course. This is the kind of thing that happens in Perth.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And, and I was still in my school uniform, and you know, like I kind of knew what was happening. I saw, you know, like I knew what was happening, even though it was kind of strange. Like it was the most bizarre. He was Italian, and his English wasn't great, and it was the most bizarre kind of conversation. Like, made no sense whatsoever. And if anyone had overheard it, they would have been thinking, you know, who are these migrants fresh off the boat? You know, they can't even understand.
No idea what was going on.
Can't understand each other. But you know, somewhere along the line, he asked me for a drink. He took me to a bar, and we had a drink, and then we went back to his place, and sex was kind of disastrous. Because, you know, like I knew nothing, so I certainly didn't know anything about lubrication. Anyway, it was kind of disastrous. And after that, I sort of swore, you know, I went home and I said, you know, I'm not really gay, I'm bisexual. But I kind of knew, like I kind of knew. And I guess not having sort of parental pressures didn't make me feel bad about it. You know, I was fairly well accepted, and so yeah, it wasn't a huge deal for me.
What I want to sort of think about is that perception of, and it's a common perception of young Asian guys with older Anglo-Saxon men, and it's something that we either see as an experience in the community, or people talk about, or it's in the media. What do you think about that? So, like, do you think it actually is common, like it actually happens, and what do you think about it? Why does it happen?
I guess my experience of the whole sort of rice queen sort of thing was potato queen thing. Yeah, when I was pretty strong when I was growing up and in my 20s, like, because it seemed as though that was the predominant model of how the kind of relationship you would have if you were an Asian man, and certainly, you know, when I went out on the gay scene and saw other Asian Chinese gay men with Caucasian men, that they tended to be older. I think that was very much true of the 80s and probably 90s. But I think, you know, things have shifted a lot in the last, certainly in the last decade, and I mean, inevitably because of, you know, like there's a much bigger population of Asian men now, and you know, the demographics have changed a lot, and I think that kind of affects things, and also, you know, patterns or models of desire and what's desirable have shifted and changed as well.
What about self-esteem, and because there are those factors that people talk about, that there's that lack of self-esteem, but you know, the more self-esteem, more confident people build, the more they target or choose, you know, get what they want. Or choose.
I don't know whether you get what you want.
But feel more confident about being with someone your own age, rather than thinking, oh, well, I can only pick up an older guy sort of thing, because that sort of thing, you know what I'm talking about?
I certainly think that the effect that it does. I made a documentary a few years ago called China Dolls, which was about the experience of being gay and Chinese in Australia, or in a Western environment, and you know, both my experience and the experience of most of the people I talked to and interviewed was that that you did, growing up through the 80s and 90s, being Asian and feeling fairly much invisible within a mainstream gay sort of culture did have an effect on your self-esteem and your sense of who you were attractive to, whether you were attractive or not. I mean, I think it's the other thing that's not discussed much when you talk about the effect that race has on you is that you often don't know whether you're attractive or not, because people are attracted to you because of your race or not because of your race.
Right.
But you don't actually have any idea of who you are yourself.
Yeah. But do you think, the Victorian AIDS Council, in fact, Australia-wide, there was a campaign, educational campaign, around that sort of stuff for gay Asian men. Do you think there has been enough done in that area in terms of, I suppose, health promotion or emotional health promotion to sort of deal with those issues? Does there need to be anything done?
I think that there has been a number of attempts by public organisations to talk about those kinds of issues, and I think that they're sort of worthwhile, worth raising the debate and talking about in terms of consciousness. I think ultimately, in terms of how you feel about yourself, that kind of work is not really going to change a lot. You know, like it's good to have those issues acknowledged, but I think that everyone who deals with race in whatever way, whatever shape or form, and you know, I do perceive it as a form of racism. You know, you have to come to your own way of dealing with it and a personal sort of understanding.
And it's not going to be done by looking at a poster on a wall, or you know, it's a sort of more counselling or more talking to people about it.
It's about working out how you feel about yourself.
Yeah. Well, do you think there's discrimination in the community?
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Have you experienced it yourself?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
We'll get back to that. You're watching Face to Face. Don't go away. We'll be back straight after this short break. And welcome back to Face. I'm Vic Perri, and tonight I'm talking to Tony Ayres. And in the first segment, we'll sort of give you a bit of an insight into Tony's life, and very soon we'll start talking about your work, especially your current work. But just to backtrack just a little bit about, I asked you a question about discrimination in the community, and I actually asked you if you've experienced any, and you have. What have you experienced? Anything lately, or is this something a lot, or even currently?
Probably nothing for a few years. I certainly remember periods of times when I would be, say, at a party or a bar, or you know, and just be with some friends and feel completely like everyone was interested in everyone except for me. So so part of that is psychological, but you know, I've also had experiences in those situations of being told outright, "Oh, sorry, I'm not into Asians," you know, that kind of thing. And that's, you know, it's even though intellectually you know that you know that's nothing. There's nothing you can do about that. It is actually quite. It sort of does affect you.
To hear it.
Yeah, it does.
Well,
affect
I was going to say, because some people will argue that there is a difference, you know, between discrimination, when discrimination involves, you know, how you treat someone, that sort of thing, and just the sexual preference. And some people say, well, you know, some of my best friends are Asian, or that sort of stuff, but I just prefer not to sleep with them. I just don't find them attractive. Is that an okay argument?
I certainly think that, personally, that's absolutely truthful to people's experience, you know, and in that sense, that's, you know, there's nothing you can say or argue about that. But I also think that if you take it apart a little bit and then ask the question, well, why? Then you start. I mean, racism is about invisible, unconscious prejudices we have about other people. That's what defines it, and I think that so yes, of course, you know, we're not attracted to this or that, but it's only when you actually ask the question of why you're not attracted. Why is it that all Asians look alike? You know, why?
Well, that's interesting, actually, because that's another perception where people of non-Asian background will assume that all Asians are the same.
Yeah.
You know, they may realise that there are different countries, but it's as far as they know, and that you all have the same culture, language, all that sort of stuff. You know, that's not true, is it?
No, absolutely not. And like I think that it's as meaningless as saying all Caucasians look alike, or I'm not into Caucasians because they all look the same.
But culturally, there are huge differences between countries.
There are lots of different countries. I mean, it's the same as Europe. I mean, the thing is, Asia really doesn't exist except for as a European construction. Like it's not something that people in sort of Vietnam or in China or in Japan are actually conscious of. That that it's always been a Western way of describing a geographic region.
Well, that's interesting because I remember at a launch a few years ago, and it was a resource by the Victorian AIDS Council Gay Men's Health Centre, and you made an interesting comment that you found interesting the word Asian was used in the campaign. It's something that you wouldn't have used yourself because you saw yourself as Chinese, not Asian. Is that a feeling? Is that something that most of the people of Asian background in Australia have the same sort of thing, or are some people happy to be called Asian?
Yeah. I think that like I was probably a bit more political in those days, a bit more purist. Right. I certainly think that there are big questions around the question, over the whole word Asian, because I think that often that invites people to think of us as the same. Rather than sort of saying, we are actually different people. But these days, it's just easier.
Yeah. Well, apart from all that, you also, and I did say at the very start, I'm a writer-director, so, but I do want to know first, before you actually got into this sort of work, what else did you do? Or were you always writing and directing?
No, I started out by going to art school, and I used to be a silkscreen printer. Oh. So that was my, which was...
T-shirts or something a bit more elaborate than that?
Oh, there was kind of like fine art silks posters, really, and they did reasonably well. The National Gallery bought my whole final year collection, and so they were kind of... but I really didn't, even when I was doing it, I knew that I didn't want to do it, and so I ended up going to film school and worked in the industry for a couple of years, and then went to film school in Sydney and trained specifically as a writer, and have spent most of my career working in television as a writer, and sort of also directing predominantly documentary, but recently drama as well.
Right. Well, let's look at some of your earlier work. There's Eternity.
No, I didn't do Eternity.
Oh, you didn't do Eternity. No. My mistake. Sorry.
Lawrence Johnson did Eternity.
You're right. That rings a bell. Sadness.
Yep.
Well, tell us about Sadness, because when I saw that, it was quite, like, towards the end, it was quite I'll say shocking sort of ending. I thoroughly enjoyed the film. It was quite, I don't know, it gave me a very heavy feeling at the end. How did that come about?
Sadness is a monologue by a Chinese-Australian photographer, William Yang, and he made the show in the early 90s, as he said, when he started going to more funerals and parties. And he has performed it all around the world, and it's basically a slideshow. It's him sort of talking to an audience and showing slides, and it's a very personal show. And there are two journeys in Sadness. One is the story of a murder that happened in his family in the 1920s, and the other story is the story of friends of his who've died of HIV and AIDS-related conditions. And the show sort of weaves these two journeys together and somehow kind of makes a meaningful comment about the nature of grief and the nature of loss at the end. So I saw the show when it first was performed and didn't really think about doing anything with it until probably the mid-90s, when I saw another documentary on SBS called I'll Be Your Mirror by an American photographer, Nan Goldin. And I felt really inspired upon seeing that. And
was that about HIV as well?
Yeah, it was about her life. She had a similar kind of show to Williams in that she just took photos. She's a stunning photographer. Took photos and talked about her friends. And I thought, well, William Show did that as well. And so it sort of turned me back towards Sadness. Of course, I didn't really want to do what Nan Goldin had done in her documentary, so Sadness is a much more stylised piece. And it's, in terms of form, it's kind of like, it's a performance documentary, but it actually is difficult to locate in form because it's not really a documentary, but it's not a drama either. It's something in between.
And apart from the recent stuff like Walking on Water and your current play, what else did you work on? Or have you worked on?
I sort of did a whole range of things. I've worked for commercial television. I wrote a mini-series for Channel 9 called The Violent Earth, which was a co-production between Arte in France and Channel 9 here. I worked on a series of television plays for the ABC called Naked, which is a series which Jam Chapman produced, who produced The Piano and Lantana. And that was a series of 1-hour television plays about men and masculinity. I worked on a series called Six Pack, which was part of SBS's... it was the very first drama series that SBS did, I think, or maybe the second one or the other.
And with Walking on Water, how did that come about?
Walking on Water started because, although I became involved as a director because I was the script editor on it. So as well as writing and directing, I work on other people's scripts and help them develop it. And the writer is a friend of mine, Roger Monk, and I became very attached to the project, and it was at a point where I was directing more, and I certainly was very keen to direct a feature film, so I suggested myself as the director on the project. And
we all know how popular that film was, or how successful it was. But now, just recently, you've written a play, The Fat Boy. Now, so is that your first play?
Yeah, The Fat Boy is the first. I've worked in theatre before. I worked on a couple of plays by a playwright, Tim Conagray, a writer, Tim Conagray, who wrote Harold and the Man, and there were 2 one-act plays he did at Playbox a few years ago called Thieving Boy and Like Stars in My Hands, and I worked on those ones as well.
And how was The Fat Boy received?
Fat Boy, it's been pretty amazing so far. It's a very strange play. It's it's kind of, it comes from my sense of being outside of the world, or feelings of being other, and so it's about a big fat boy and his big fat slaggy mother. So it's kind of like it's a comedy and it's a tragedy that's sort of like a comedy as well. It's a very unusual play.
I read a quote in a paper recently about you sort of not necessarily identifying, but having an interest in otherness.
Yeah. I guess like emotionally, I'm sort of engaged by people's stories who don't sort of fit in and who are outside of the mainstream, and I certainly think like when you look at the ads on in the magazines and stuff, like you can't be fat, you can't be femme, you can't be an Asian. So I've done the Asian thing already. So I thought, I'll do I'll do the fat femme now.
Did you look for all of that, but an Asian character as well?
I thought about it for a second. Yeah, I thought about it for a second, but then I thought, impossible to cast.
What about representation in the media at the moment? Is there enough? Do you think there's enough sort of people, whether it be ads or film or whatever, of people of Asian background?
Oh, listen, it's representation is a very complicated issue. It's always going to be difficult for people who are not part of our idealised sense of what we want to be. Our idealised projections and fantasies to actually fill the screens. I mean, I think there are all kinds of censorships that go on, both overtly and covertly, and I certainly don't think there are ever enough of the real world, because ultimately that's not what that's about. That's not what that.
People want the glamour. People want
something
stereotypes.
Yeah, people want something to project themselves into. They don't necessarily want to see themselves.
Exactly. We have to cut it there. Thanks very much for coming on, Tony. So you've been watching Face to Face. We have to go. I've been rounded up there. You've been watching Face to Face, Vic Perri, and we'll see you next time.